Hi there, I'm Lindy. 11 years ago, I was erased from my own family without a word. No goodbye, no explanation. Tonight, I showed up at my sister's birthday, uninvited. No one recognized me, not even my own mother. They called me a guest. But what they didn't know was that the tech Jody claimed to invent, that was mine. The tuition they paid for her, they stole it from me. They told everyone I walked away. But what if I never had a choice? I hadn't been on this porch in over a decade, but the sound of gravel under my heels still felt the same. I stepped out of the car, holding my breath longer than I meant to, clutching the invitation like it might disappear. My name wasn't on it. Well, not in the sender's line. Wesley invited me, not Jody. That said everything. The Langley estate hadn't changed. White pillars, brick steps, the scent of freshly clipped boxwood hedges. I ran my fingers down the front of my black coat before walking up. 11 years. That's how long it had been since I was erased. Wesley greeted me at the front door with his signature half-smile and a warm hug, one of the few who hadn't taken a side when everything imploded years ago. "Madeline, it means a lot that you're here," he said, like he actually meant it. He didn't know what he'd stirred up. I stepped inside, and it hit me all at once. The music, the scent of candles, the sound of clinking glasses, and the sea of unfamiliar but somehow familiar faces. They were the same doctors, colleagues, old family friends, just older, grayer. I spotted my mother first, Darla Langley, hair perfectly coiffed, face tight with just the right balance of southern charm and frost. Her eyes skimmed past me. For a second, I wasn't sure if she'd pretend not to know me or pretend I wasn't standing there. "Wesley's brilliant guest," she finally said to a pair of doctors standing nearby. "She's done something with tech." She didn't say my name, definitely didn't say my daughter. I felt my jaw clench, but I nodded and played along. I'd had 11 years to prepare for this. I wasn't here to get her approval. I was here to be seen. I walked further in and saw Boyd, my father, near the fireplace. He didn't even try to hide his disapproval. Just gave me that look, the one that said, "Don't make this about you." As if this house, this night, this family had ever been about anyone but Jody. A slideshow looped across a giant screen. Jody as a toddler, Jody graduating med school, Jody in a lab coat, posing like she invented something. Then came the family photos. I braced myself, and there it was. One photo, taken on our old front porch, cropped. My arm was still in it, but I wasn't. I caught whispers behind me. "She looks familiar. Isn't that the CEO of NeuroSentinel?" I didn't turn. I didn't flinch. I just walked to the bar and ordered sparkling water. From the other side of the room, I watched Jody. She glowed under the chandelier, laughing like she'd earned every bit of this night. Polished, untouchable, false. They didn't know who I was. Not yet. But they would. I left the main hall quietly, my glass still cold in hand, condensation trailing down my fingers. I needed a pause from the performance, theirs, not mine. Off to the side was the private lounge, where the noise dulled into a soft hum. From here, I could see the party continuing like a well-rehearsed play, but I knew every line in their script, and every lie behind it. A cluster of guests near the fireplace were gushing about Jody's so-called Harvard-grade algorithm. I nearly laughed. That tech was born in a corner booth of a 24-hour diner, scribbled across napkins while I waited tables and pulled double shifts at urgent care. They'd only ever seen the polished product, never the grime behind it. I stared at the flames for a moment too long, then turned away before the memory swallowed me. That's when I noticed Wesley across the room, talking to a caterer and fumbling with his phone. A guest had asked to borrow it. He waved over Darla and took hers from her clutch instead. His thumb scrolled through her contacts casually until he froze. I could tell by the way his brow dipped, then lifted. Something on the screen caught him off guard. His head tilted slightly. That's when I knew. He'd seen it. He leaned toward the hallway and whispered, "Why would she label someone spam caller?" with a note saying, "Do not answer. Manipulative?" The guest beside him laughed awkwardly. "Probably her ex-hairdresser." Wesley didn't laugh. I took another sip, letting the burn of citrus fizz remind me I was still here, still present. My heart didn't race. I'd come prepared for this moment, whether it happened tonight or not. He glanced at me, not a glare, not curiosity, just thought. Like a man realizing the pieces of a puzzle had been shoved together by force, and something never quite fit. I held his gaze, calm, steady. Let him keep wondering. The lounge grew quiet again, but my mind didn't. It drifted, back to the last voicemail I left for my mother. 11 years ago. I had called to wish Jody a happy birthday. My voice was shaking then, still naive enough to hope kindness mattered. I pictured Darla hearing that message, sitting in her car, frozen, then without a blink pressing delete, like it was junk mail. Like I was never lost. I didn't disappear. I kept calling until they decided I didn't exist. He doesn't know it yet, but he's holding the first crack in their perfect facade. As the music softened and the lights dimmed, a voice from the DJ booth called everyone's attention to the center of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, a special moment now. Please welcome the woman we're all here to celebrate, Jody Russo. Applause swelled, glasses clinked. I stayed near the buffet, my back to the wall, half-shadowed. My drink was untouched. Jody stepped forward, glowing in a pale blue dress that hugged her like a PR campaign. Wesley stood beside her, smiling, though not as easily as before. Darla and Boyd stood front and center, wearing faces sculpted for admiration. I'm honored to share something close to my heart tonight, Jody began, tapping the clicker in her hand. Something I've developed over the last few years. Project NeuroSync. I didn't blink. I didn't move. I just listened. She clicked to a slide titled Empowering Recovery Through Real-Time Neural Monitoring, the exact phrase I used at the National Health Summit 2 years ago, word for word. The visuals were different, shinier, but the foundation? Mine. When I designed NeuroSync, she said, looking directly at the crowd, I wanted to make healing not just faster, but smarter, safer, more humane. The room murmured with approval. Boyd nodded like he'd raised a genius. Darla pressed her hand to her chest, eyes misting. I kept my expression blank, but inside it was roaring. She didn't just steal lines, she stole language, the language I bled for while working night shifts and sneaking textbooks into supply closets. She hijacked my journey, stitched it to her smile, and wrapped it in a bow for applause. Across the room, I caught Wesley watching me, his head tilted slightly. Doubt flickered behind his eyes, like a match trying to catch. She didn't just take my money, I thought. She took my years, my voice, and now they're clapping for her. Then it happened. Barely a whisper, but enough. Didn't Lindy Chamberlain pioneer this concept? A doctor muttered to his colleague. Jody flinched, just slightly. She tapped the clicker fast, switching to a diagram. I saw it. Wesley saw it. She didn't expect anyone to remember me. She'd counted on my silence, my absence. But now I was standing right here. I built a solution to save lives. They used it to erase mine. I slipped out through the French doors onto the back patio, the chill of early spring brushing my skin like a warning. The laughter and clinking glasses faded behind me, replaced by the softer rustle of trees and a string quartet playing faintly from hidden speakers. I needed the distance. I needed to breathe. Then I saw them. Reuben standing near the edge of the lawn, and next to him, Silas, wearing his favorite Spider-Man hoodie, hands deep in his cargo pockets like he was guarding treasure. He spotted me and took off in a sprint, his sneakers thumping lightly on the stone tiles. "Mom!" he shouted, leaping into my arms. I crouched to hug him, the weight of his tiny body grounding me in the only truth that mattered. "You made it," I whispered, holding on tighter than I needed to. "Dad said we should wait until after the science show." He grinned, clearly unaware of what had just gone down inside. Reuben walked over, eyes searching mine. No words, just quiet support, as always. As Silas bounced around the patio, a familiar voice drifted closer. "Cute kid." Wesley. I hadn't seen him come out. He was holding a glass of red, his tie loosened, that same look from earlier still ghosting across his face. Silas pointed past him toward the hall. "That's my Aunt Jody," Mommy showed me her picture once. Wesley blinked. Aunt? Silas nodded proudly. Yup, she went to Stanford just like Mommy. But she didn't finish, right, Mom? The silence that followed was instant, like the air had been sucked out of the night. I stood frozen, my smile tight. Reuben's hand slipped onto my shoulder. Wesley's gaze never left me. Behind him, two guests paused mid-sip. Wait, Jody said she was an only child, one whispered. Didn't she say she developed neurosync alone? Another added, voice sharp with realization. The space between Wesley and me shrank, not physically, but in truth. He didn't ask a single question. He didn't need to. The timeline, the tech, the lie, it was unraveling faster than anyone could stop it. I looked down at Silas, who had already wandered to the edge of the koi pond, humming to himself, completely unaware that his innocent words had just sliced through a decade of deceit. The truth has a funny way of slipping past the gatekeepers, especially when it's wearing Spider-Man sneakers. I slipped through the patio doors into the side hall, letting the heavier silence wrap around me like armor. The hum of conversation was still alive in the distance, but out here it felt quieter, almost manageable. Almost. A shadow peeled away from the wallpapered wall. Boyd. You just couldn't help yourself, could you? He hissed, voice low but heavy with heat. Had to make tonight about you, again. I didn't answer. Not yet. He stepped closer. You left this family a mess. You bailed. Now you're back to throw grenades at your sister's life? My jaw tightened. I left? I said slowly. That's your version, huh? He crossed his arms, smug. You couldn't handle pressure. College broke you. We tried. No, you didn't. My voice didn't rise, but the weight behind it cracked something in him. You emptied my college fund without telling me. You sent it to Jody's account. You told me to be grateful she was doing something worthwhile. Then, when I asked why my tuition bounced and my housing got pulled, you locked the front door and said I didn't belong under your roof anymore? That's not how— You put my bags on the porch, Dad. Darla's heels clicked into the hallway like an alarm. Not here, she said through gritted teeth. People can hear. Good, I shot back. Maybe they should. They've heard your version for 11 years. Let them hear mine for once. Darla looked rattled. Boyd scoffed and stepped in again. You always were dramatic. And you always needed control, I said calmly. Guess what? You lost it. Wesley passed the corridor just then. He didn't stop, but he didn't look away either. He heard. Boyd leaned in, his tone quieter now, sharper. Whatever you think you're doing, it won't stick. You're still the one who left. I tilted my head. If you're so sure I walked out, why does it scare you every time I walk back in? I left Boyd standing in the hallway with his teeth clenched and hands balled into fists, Darla tugging at his sleeve like he was a live wire. I didn't rush. I walked slow, steady, through the house like I belonged. Because I did. 15 minutes later, I stood at the center of the dining room. Guests sipped wine nearby, casting glances our way, pretending not to listen. The antique chandelier above hummed quietly. Boyd was at the far end of the room now, shoulders squared like he was ready for another round. Darla stood beside him, tense, lips pursed into something between regret and rehearsal. I placed a manila envelope on the table in front of me. This, I said, voice calm but sharp enough to cut glass, is from Redwood State University, the official letter that terminated my enrollment, dated fall semester 2013. I pulled the second page free, unfolded it. And this, I held it up, is a wire transfer receipt, August 14th, the same year. The full amount of my tuition, moved from my education trust to a new account, in Jody's name, authorized by my father. The room stopped breathing. Boyd let out a bitter laugh. That's fiction. You can print anything nowadays. You think I photoshopped a bank's transfer record? I raised an eyebrow. You think a state university forged my cancellation? Darla stepped forward, desperate. Lindy, this isn't the time. No, Mom. The time was 11 years ago, the moment I asked where my tuition went and you handed me a suitcase instead of an answer. I felt a presence behind me. Reuben, silent, steady. She's not here to fight, he said, placing a hand gently on my back. She's here because she has nothing left to lose but the truth. Wesley stepped from the edge of the crowd. May I? I nodded and handed him the documents. He read them silently. No one moved. That envelope weighed less than a pound, but it held a decade of silence, sacrifice, and stolen chances. And I wasn't letting go of it this time. Guests were starting to drift back into the main room after dessert, chatter rising like nothing had happened. But something had. Something that couldn't be undone. Wesley moved with a quiet purpose. I stayed back near the fireplace, watching as he walked to Jody, who stood beneath the chandelier like she was still the center of the universe. Jody, he said, loud enough for those near the hors d'oeuvres to hear, where did you say you studied neurosync again? She blinked. I told you already. It was part of an independent study in residency. He nodded slowly, pulling his phone from his pocket. Right. And you said you developed the predictive model yourself. Her smile didn't falter, yet. Yes, from scratch, you know that. He typed, tapped, scrolled. Funny, he said, eyes on the screen. Because I just searched neurosync predictive modeling, and guess whose name popped up first? He turned the screen toward the group gathering nearby. Lindy Chamberlain, published white paper, 2021. He read a paragraph aloud. These exact words were in your speech, Jody. A ripple went through the crowd. A doctor turned to another. That paper won at Northwestern. She was the keynote. Another voice. Wait, didn't Jody always say she never had siblings? Jody's mouth opened, but no sound came. We collaborated, she finally blurted. Years ago. It was joint work. Wesley shook his head. No, you said she vanished. You said she dropped out and cut all ties. More silence, more eyes, all of them on her now. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. When lies are screamed for long enough, truth doesn't have to raise its voice. The silence didn't break. It shattered. Wesley held the room in his palm. His voice was the match, and the lies were already soaked in gasoline. All it took was one more spark. He looked at Jody, not with anger, but with something worse. Clarity. I believed everything you told me, he said, voice low. I stood by you while you built this image, but now I know you built it on her work, on her name. Jody stepped forward, eyes wide. Wes, please, don't do this. You don't know the whole story. He took off his wedding band, slow and quiet, and placed it in her hand. You didn't just lie to me. You built our life on her ashes. She gasped, but he'd already turned away. Wesley, wait! We were a team! Her voice cracked. Tell them, Dad. Tell them it wasn't all me. Boyd didn't move. Mom, she pleaded, turning to Darla. But Darla's face had collapsed into something tight gray, hollow. This is your mess, Jody, not ours. Jody staggered, like someone pulled the ground out from beneath her. I could have stayed to watch her scramble, explain, rewrite. She was always good at rewriting. Instead, I picked up my clutch from the credenza. Reuben stood waiting near the door. I nodded once. I passed Jody without looking. No smirk, no triumph, just air. She reached for me. Lindy, please, I didn't mean to take everything. I was surviving. I stopped, glanced sideways. We were all surviving. I just didn't do it by erasing someone else. I kept walking. No one stopped me. Not Boyd, not Darla, not even the guests. They parted like curtains, letting me exit the stage I never auditioned for. As I stepped into the night, a weight left my body. Not vengeance, not pride, just space, space to breathe, to build again. I didn't burn it all down. It was never built right to begin with. We reached the porch just as the night deepened into its final hush. The air was cooler now, but not cold, sharp enough to clear a breath, gentle enough to keep it steady. Then I heard him. Boots on stone, a familiar rhythm I hadn't missed in years. Boyd stepped out from the shadows of the columns, arms folded, voice low. You think walking out of that room makes you the bigger person? Before I could answer, Reuben moved. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look angry. He simply stood between us. No, he said, but staying behind to clean up someone else's damage, that would make her a fool. Boyd's jaw clenched, but he didn't reply. He stepped aside, and we left. 2 weeks passed. I sat at my desk in my home office, sun streaking through the windows. Silas was humming somewhere down the hall. Reuben had just made coffee. Life had begun moving forward. The envelope on my desk was postmarked from Jody's new address. Inside, a card and a handwritten note. Half apology, half performance. You were never the problem. I just couldn't compete with who you are. I read it once, then slid it into the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet labeled closed. Her voicemail played next. I didn't let it finish before deleting it. I wasn't angry, just done. That afternoon I signed the final paperwork. Zoom call, lawyers, grant coordinators, 20 scholarships, full rides, no essays, no family references, just merit and unmet need. The Chamberlain Grant for Displaced STEM Students. I clicked submit and closed my laptop. Later, I found Silas in the garden, kneeling beside a row of sunflowers, his small fingers pressed into the soil. Some plants don't grow well next to others, I said, crouching beside him. He looked up. Like people? I smiled, brushing dirt from his cheek. Exactly. Not everything broken has to be fixed. Some things you outgrow, some things you leave behind, some roots you're given, others you get to choose. As I look back now, not with anger but with clarity, I realize something. It's not always about being forgiven. Sometimes it's about forgiving yourself for staying quiet too long, for carrying shame that was never yours, for thinking that family means keeping the peace, even when it costs your truth. I lost years trying to prove I was worthy of love that should have been unconditional. But here's what I've learned. You don't owe anyone silence to be accepted. You don't need to shrink to belong. And you can rebuild your life, not from what they gave you, but from what they tried to take. So if you're watching this and you've ever been erased, unheard, or underestimated, this is your reminder that your story still matters. You still matter. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had to walk away from your own blood to finally feel free? Do you believe silence keeps a family together, or does truth? Tell me in the comments. If this story touched something inside you, drop a 1 below or share what state or city you're watching from. And hey, if it didn't hit home for you, that's okay too. Let me know why. Let's talk. If you want more stories like this, raw, real, and rooted in truth, subscribe to the channel now and turn on that little bell so you never miss the next one. This isn't just storytelling. This is healing. Together.